Have you ever felt like life just keeps hitting you, one punch after another? Like you're doing everything right, but everything keeps going wrong? If so, you're not alone. Today, I want to talk about a man who experienced unimaginable suffering, a man named Job. His story is ancient, but the questions it raises are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Job was described as a righteous man, someone who was blameless and upright. He had a wonderful family, great wealth, and was respected by everyone. From the outside, his life looked perfect, but in a very short period, his entire world came crashing down. First, he lost all his livestock and servants in a series of terrible disasters. Then, the unthinkable happened. A powerful wind struck the house where his 10 children were gathered, and they all perished. Can you even imagine that level of grief? Losing everything you've worked for is one thing, but losing all your children at once, it's a pain that's hard to comprehend. As if that wasn't enough, Job was then struck with a painful illness that covered his body in sores from head to toe. He went from being a respected, wealthy man to sitting in ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of pottery, completely broken. This is where the story gets really interesting. 3 of Job's friends came to comfort him. At first, they just sat with him in silence for 7 days and 7 nights, which was probably the most helpful thing they did. But then, they started talking. They were convinced that Job must have done something terrible to deserve such punishment. They operated on a simple belief: good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people. Since terrible things were happening to Job, they concluded he must be secretly wicked. For chapter after chapter, they lectured him, trying to get him to confess to some hidden sin, but Job maintained his innocence. He was confused, angry, and in deep emotional and physical pain. He cried out, questioning why this was happening to him. He wasn't perfect, and he said some things out of desperation, but he never cursed God. He just wanted answers. He wanted to understand the why. Why me? Why this? Haven't we all asked those questions when we're going through a tough time? This is the core of Job's struggle. It's the human struggle when faced with suffering that seems senseless and unfair. His friends, with their simple, black and white answers, were no help at all. In fact, they made his suffering worse by judging him and adding guilt to his grief. Finally, after all the back and forth, God speaks. But here's the twist. God never tells Job why he suffered. He doesn't explain the backstory or justify the reasons. Instead, he asks Job a series of questions about the wonders of creation. He talks about the foundations of the earth, the stars in the sky, the mysteries of the ocean, and the wildness of nature. Through these questions, God reveals his immense wisdom and power, showing Job that the universe is far more complex than we can ever fully understand. The point wasn't to belittle Job, but to shift his perspective. It was to show him that he was a small, but valuable, part of a much bigger, grander story, one orchestrated by a God who is both all-powerful and intimately involved. In the end, Job's response is humility. He realizes he spoke of things he didn't understand, and through this surrender, he finds a deeper, more personal relationship with God than he ever had before. The story concludes with Job's fortunes being restored. He receives double what he had before, has more children, and lives a long, full life. But the happy ending isn't the main point. The true lesson of Job is that faith isn't about having all the answers. It teaches us that suffering isn't always a punishment, and sometimes the most profound growth comes from our deepest pain. It also reminds us to be compassionate, not judgmental, toward those who are hurting. So, if you're going through a Job season in your own life, hold on. It's okay to ask questions, to cry out, and to not understand. Your pain is real and valid, but know that you're not forgotten, and there is purpose even in the pain. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content. See you next time.